We shall now continue the general debate. The Assembly will hear an address by His Highness Sheikh Jabir Al-Mubarak Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, Prime Minister of the State of Kuwait. May I request protocol to escort His Highness. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Highness Sheikh Jabir Al-Mubarak Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, Prime Minister of the State of Kuwait, and I invite him to address the General Assembly.
Mr. President, may the peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. It is my pleasure at the outset to extend our sincere congratulations to you personally and to your friendly country, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for your election as President of the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I assure you of our full support in all what would facilitate your work. I would like to seize this opportunity to express sincere appreciation for the outstanding efforts of your predecessor during her capable and successful presidency of the previous session. Allow me also to pay tribute to the great and continued efforts of His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, in leading this inveterate organization. Mr. President, those who have followed the course of action at the United Nations for more than 7 decades will, in effect, reach a basic conclusion. The United Nations has addressed numerous serious challenges and chronic crises that faced the world. It is the safe haven to end differences and ensure the prominence of the logic of peace based on diplomacy in order to shield the coming generations against the scourge of wars and conflicts. Mr. President, since its inception, the State of Kuwait has adopted a foreign policy based on the foundations of peace. As Kuwait's non-permanent membership in the Security Council draws to an end, it has, through its direct involvement and interaction with the overall issues, protracted and urgent issues, become more aware of the importance of reinforcing dialogue and pluralism to address global challenges. And the United Nations is the ideal place to address such issues. In this regard, we renew the position of the State of Kuwait, which supports the principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter to ensure the continuity of the work of the organization and the effectiveness of its outputs in order to guarantee the implementation of its lofty message, namely the maintenance of international peace and security. Mr. President, this year, the Arab Gulf has been hit by a series of terrorist and subversive acts that have threatened the freedom of navigation in this vital region of the world and undermined the flow of energy supplies. This is in addition to the recent attacks on the sisterly kingdom of Saudi Arabia, specifically the ones that targeted vital installations in the province of Abqaiq and Hijrat Khurais. Once again, we strongly condemn such terrorist attacks, and we reaffirm the full support of the State of Kuwait to all the measures that the sisterly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is taking in order to preserve its security and stability. We also call once again on the international community to shoulder its responsibilities in ensuring and protecting the freedom of navigation in this important part of the world and ensuring the respect of the law of the sea, which, in turn, would preserve international peace and security. Mr. President, the Palestinian question occupies a central and pivotal place in our Arab world and Islamic world as well. If it remains unresolved, it would increase the intensity of tensions and instability in the region. Therefore, it is imperative to continue making every possible effort to relaunch serious negotiations within a specified time frame to reach a just and comprehensive peace based on the two-state solution and the references of the peace process, the resolutions of international legitimacy, and the Arab Peace Initiative as launched in 2002. It is also important to end Israeli occupation, establish an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as a capital along the borders of pre-June 4, 1967. Furthermore, all Israeli practices violating the sanctity of religious sites must cease. Israeli settlement activities on occupied Palestinian territories must come to an end. At the same time, we stress that any settlement, deal, or unilateral solution outside the framework of these references shall only prolong the Palestinian question and exacerbate its fallouts. Mr. President, the developments of the Syrian crisis, which has entered its 9th year, bearing all the images and meanings of human suffering, stand as a real witness to the lack of international consensus and the absence of dialogue between the parties. This was a main reason for prolonging this bloody conflict. From this rostrum, we would like to reiterate our firm position. There can be no military solution for this crisis. We stress the need to work on a political settlement in line with relevant Security Council resolutions, particularly Resolution 2254 and the Geneva Communiqué of 2012 in order to meet the aspirations and ambition of the brotherly Syrian people. Mr. President, the continuation of the Yemeni crisis remains a remarkable indication of the reality of how to deal with relevant resolutions and outputs of the Security Council. However, despite the resumption of the negotiations between the parties to the crisis and the reaching of the Stockholm Agreement by the end of last year, the stalemate and non-implementation of the agreement prevailed. The State of Kuwait stresses that there is no military solution to this crisis. We are playing a supporting role to the United Nations effort to facilitate the political process. We therefore renew our readiness to host our Yemeni brothers to hold another round of consultations in the State of Kuwait under the auspices of the United Nations to reach a comprehensive and final political agreement based on the three references agreed upon, namely the initiative of the Gulf Cooperation countries and its implementation mechanism, the outcomes of the National Dialogue Conference, and the relevant Security Council resolutions, specifically Resolution 2216, to put an end to this crisis and preserve the security, stability, and territorial integrity of Yemen. Mr. President, based on the principal points of consolidating good neighborly relations promoted in the Charter of the United Nations, we renew our call to the Islamic Republic of Iran to take serious confidence-building measures to start a dialogue based on respecting the sovereignty of states and non-interference in their internal affairs, and to reduce tensions in the Gulf and maintain the safety of maritime navigation. This would contribute in establishing relations based on mutual respect and cooperation. This would also reflect the future aspirations of all the peoples of the region to live in peace and stability and achieve their welfare and development. Mr. President, there is no doubt that the growing phenomenon of terrorism and violent extremism is one of the most prominent and dangerous challenges facing the international system and hitting it at its core. The Middle East specifically has suffered tremendously from the subversive roles of terrorist groups, foremost among which the so-called Daesh, ISIS, which has used Islam as a cover for its destructive intentions. This is why there were calls to intensify efforts to combat this real threat in all its forms and manifestations, to dry up its resources, to drain its funding and implement international and regional conventions on combating terrorism. In light of the exacerbation of this imminent danger in several countries of our region, namely Yemen, Libya, Syria, Somalia, and Afghanistan, the experience of brotherly Iraq, being the country that suffered the most from the atrocities of the terrorist group Daesh, had a concrete impact on purging this terrorist group from Iraqi territory, wherein the major role of the international community was played in cooperation with the Iraqi government. Mr. President, 4 years ago, we adopted the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. This is one of the most remarkable and important successes of the United Nations. It is a complementary effort to the achievements of the MDGs. It is human-centered and based on ambition. As we shoulder our responsibilities and international responsibilities in this regard, the State of Kuwait submitted its first voluntary national review for 2019 on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals during the high-level political forum. This forum has proven the political will of the leaders of our country. We highlighted the instructions of His Highness Sheikh Sabah Al-Hamad Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, the Emir of the State of Kuwait, to strengthen Kuwait's commitment to international partnership and solidarity as part of the policies of the government on the short, medium, and long term to achieve the highest gains in sustainable development and to objectively link them to Kuwait's 2035 vision and to the 2030 agenda. In the State of Kuwait, we strive to provide the right environment to encourage investments, quality investments, to attract quality investments from all over the world. We note with profound satisfaction the remarkable progress achieved over the past years. This was a result of intensive efforts and a bundle of legislations and measures that the state of Kuwait has undertaken. They have yielded the desired positive effects. So we look forward to promoting our position in the international financial indicators, including the Ease of Doing Business Index, which is published annually by the World Bank Group. In conclusion, allow me to thank you for your attention and apologize if my statement has taken too long. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you.
Yeah, sure. On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank His Highness Sheikh Al-Mubarak, Al-Hamad, Al-Sabah for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Highness.